Our mission through these forums and other Hourglass venues is threefold: to work toward innovative solutions that balance the need for growth and economic prosperity, to create the conditions for informed decision-making, and to protect the unique character and quality of Lancaster County. To this end, we're delighted that in our audience tonight are not only folks from the city, from the county and the region, but in fact from all across the Commonwealth. I want to thank our sponsors, American Home Bank, the Drogaris Companies, Fulton Bank, M&T Bank, PPL, and Penn Square Partners. It's through sponsors such as these and contributors such as yourself that Hourglass can continue to bring these events forward. May I have a round of applause for the sponsors, please? Thanks. We anticipate that our speaker will generate questions from the audience, and we've reserved time for this. You will note a question card in your program, which we will gather at the conclusion of the presentation. Please pass them promptly to the outside where they'll be collected. The Q&A will be moderated by Ronald Bailey, Hourglass board member and member of the Pennsylvania State Planning Board. We will not be able to answer all of the questions, but we will see that they will be collected and presented to city leadership. 2 years ago, we touched off Hourglass's initiatives on downtown vitality with a forum led by Christopher Lineberger, nationally known civic thought leader who challenged us to pursue walkable urbanity. We had a fresh mayor at the time who floored our speaker in a private meeting the next day by asking for and receiving a reading list on forward-looking city governance. In 30 years, Lineberger had never been asked by a client for that. Remarkable progress is underway, Mayor Gray, as you've asked us to step back and look at ourselves as first-time visitors and more concerned with achieving results than claiming credit. I'll dispense with a lengthy intro of our featured speaker, Joseph Riley. You have a brief bio in your program, and his Google hits run into the tens of thousands. He spoke at an Hourglass forum 7 years ago and has assumed the position of our most popular and requested speaker. He charged us then, among other things, to honor the street. A nationally acclaimed city administrator, now in his extraordinary 9th term as mayor, perhaps no other modern urban leader has such tenure in overseeing the continuous transforming success of the place he calls home. Like our own Charleston strives to achieve a balance between its natural and built assets and economic growth. A city of 121,000 with $585 million of new construction underway as of last year. 33 uninterrupted years of thoughtful consideration of issues and opportunities preserving Charleston's heritage while sustaining its future. Mayor Riley, we feel we can learn from you, and a hearty Lancaster welcome back.
Well, thank you so very much, Sid, Art, those of you who have given me the opportunity to return to your wonderful city, Mayor Gray, members of City Council, ladies and gentlemen, it's so thrilling to be back. I had the opportunity this afternoon to see the remarkable progress that is going on in your beautiful and historic city. It's easier for an outsider to see our cities. It would be easier for you to see my city than me, because I know it and see it every day. But the robust neighborhoods, the unusual compactness of your city, the downtown, your history, the presence of the universities, the strong economy, the marvelous revitalization projects that have been completed and are underway, the arts and culture, and so much more. This is an American story, what is happening in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it is the future of America that is cities the size and scale of Lancaster. It's where increasingly people will want to live because of, among other things, the human scale and the sense of place. What you have been doing and what you are doing is putting increasingly into place the components of a great city that will redound to the benefit of your citizens now and in the generations to come. I will speak tonight about city building and using my city to help facilitate that. You could give me a presentation about Lancaster to help discuss city building. City builders is something that we all must be. Citizens of a city must be city builders. We must accept the responsibility, individually, collectively, as a community, as a city, of making our places better for our citizens to live. And for our country, it is essential. Increasingly, every day, we become more urban and less rural. Our success, economically and culturally, as a civilization in America, every day increasingly depends upon our capacity to be great city builders. Lively, diverse, active, culturally engaged, physically beautiful places that have sense of themselves. That is our responsibility. And that's what I will seek to talk to you about tonight. Charleston is an old American city, as is Lancaster, the oldest inland city in America. As with your city, perhaps even more so, because we had the interruption of the Civil War, which basically destroyed our economy for about 80 years, but we were built before the automobile and the elevator, and our city, as yours, is a city of human scale. City leaders had the wisdom in the early 20th century, when the Industrial Revolution had not occurred, and we still had the 19th century, 18th and 19th century form in our city, to not allow it to be mindlessly demolished and help preserve something that is so special to all of us today. But Charleston is a real live American city. It's not a theme park. It's not a movie set. It's filled with all the great opportunities for success and failures, mistakes. This was a terrible mistake. The historic Charleston Hotel, where the Democratic Convention, the National Democratic Convention of 1860 met. One of the first hotels in America, very beautiful. It was demolished in the 1950s because city leaders knew to be a great city you had to have a drive-in motel. There wasn't a great city without a drive-in motel. You know, the challenge in city building is to make sure we never make a mistake. And it's not easy. We have to work very hard to make sure we understand, but to make sure that we never make a mistake. We started work in the poor sections of our city with the challenge of vacant lots. We had a lot of vacant lots in our city because of disinvestment. We wanted to put affordable housing in there. This is what houses look like in those neighborhoods. They're framed, they address the sidewalk. When they built affordable housing in the 50s and 60s, they built that. It's like they really didn't care what it looked like because they thought it didn't matter, and they were doing something worthwhile. And usually they'd put a cyclone fence around it to kind of warn you that it was unsafe and you really wouldn't want to live there anyway. And so we were determined to build handsome, affordable housing. We challenged the architecture community. We picked a young architect. This is what he designed. It didn't cost any more than the ugly stuff. But you know what? It respected the neighborhood. It blended in. Luckily, we had that experience when the Housing Authority got a grant for a new housing project. They were so excited. They'd been planning it. They knew just where to put it. 2 blocks, tear down a few buildings, build a new project. 150 units. I said, we're not going to build it. They said, Mayor, you crazy, we'll get impeached. I said, no. We're going to build public housing, but we're going to scatter it throughout the city. on individual lots or groups of lots. Well, they said, no, it'd be hard to maintain. You have to move around. I said, we're not going to do this anymore, because it was well-intentioned but ignored all the accumulated lessons that city building has taught us for centuries about neighborhood and scale and sense of place. We're not going to do this. We're going to scatter them. So they have said, all right, then we started the interesting process of picking the lots. You know, it creates a little discussion. I mean, the average American doesn't wake up in the morning, turn to his spouse and say, honey, wouldn't it be nice if we could get us a little public housing next door? You know, we never had it. So we had some debates and all of that, and then we picked the sites, picked the architects, told them what we wanted. They came with their designs. They were ugly. We fired the architects, got some other architects, and then that's what they built. The ones closest to you from right to left were public housing, really poor people, housing authority, federally subsidized, live there. Tied in with the architecture. When Prince Charles came to Charleston, the only photo op we wanted was in front of these. Said this was the best lesson, architecture lesson that Charleston had to share with the rest of the world. Not our historic buildings restored, which are very important, is that we showed how you could build housing for very poor people beautifully. When we were opening these, I went to a reception at the president of one of our college's homes one evening, and one of the servers came up to me in a crush of people cocktail party with the tray, and she just came up to me close and she whispered, and she said, Mayor Riley, I want to thank you. And I said, what's that for, ma'am? And she said, because Monday I'm moving into 7 Marion Street, which is one of these, and it's so beautiful. And then she walked away. And I thought back then in the late 70s, maybe with just a few syllables, a prospective tenant of public housing had never used the word beautiful before. But the fact of the matter is that in city building, we should never allow anything to be built that doesn't add beauty to our city. There's no reason to do it. There's no excuse to do it. We can't, as great city builders, ever let it happen. Now, this one building, 2 apartments, really poor people became a catalyst because it looked nice. So across the street, these were in very bad shape. We put a little money in them and got them restored. There was a vacant lot next to the public housing. Market rate housing went in there. Around the corner, another vacant lot, market rate housing. One building, 2 apartments, public housing, good urban design. Became a catalytic agent for restoring a whole neighborhood. We've worked hard to keep the bulldozer out. These are poor neighborhoods, and show you a few before and after, but it would have been so easy to let them go and then to bulldoze them all down, kind of clean it out, get a fresh start. But what you know in Lancaster, what we know in Charleston, and increasingly our country is learning is, you know that when we do that, we have forever robbed the city of a memory. And the physical memories are very important. They give a sense of heritage and history and time. You know, how sad it would be if America had at most 70-year-old buildings. You know, 300 years from now, everything's about 70 years old. We have no sense of ourselves or where we were. And your work here and our work is to make sure that 50, 100, 200 years from now, we have that heritage. And then these buildings, you're not going to replace that. So these were housing for very poor people. We wanted to help the citizens who withstood these neighborhoods stay in there. And one by one, these were obviously apartments restored. And this was one that was, we sold a nonprofit. The C on the left had fire burned out, and we gave it to a nonprofit. Put some money in it and had it restored for affordable housing, and it looked so nice. I went up one day and took pictures as they were finishing up because I love the thought of a person of modest resources having a 3rd floor piazza overlooking the 19th century roofscape of our city. These were called freedmen's cottages, what African Americans built after the Civil War when they could legally own land. It was a 1-story version of the typical residential building in Charleston, which we call a Charleston single house. It's 1 single room wide. And they were in a terrible neighborhood, and then we had Hurricane Hugo in 1989 come through, and it almost knocked them down. But we knew we couldn't let them go. So we worked with Habitat and churches and got them restored, and that saved the neighborhood, but it taught us the building type. We'd been struggling with what do we build for transitional housing, moving people out of the shelter, for homeless shelter, and getting them a place that they can pay a little bit of rent. So young architects inspired by that designed transitional housing, won an award from the AIA. We won an award for the President of the United States for 25 years of federally funded projects. They gave 11 awards, and our scattered site public housing got one of those. And so often, you know, people will say, well, it's just, you know, it's just public housing, it's just transitional housing, it's just a parking garage, it's just a whatever. You know, like it doesn't, if it's just that, it doesn't matter what it looks like. And of course, anything we build should add to the beauty and quality of our city. This was a building, admittedly not in very good shape, and I was interested. It was in a corner, important corner, and told the building official we needed to acquire it. And he said, Mayor, it can't be saved. And I said, why? And he said, because it's been shifting, and the utility pole is vertical. It was straight and leaning. And he said, Mayor, the house, and I said, well, we'll get a contract in to fix. He said, Mayor, it's leaning, and it's going to fall on the house next door and kill the people. And I said, well, not if we move the people out. So we moved them to a Holiday Inn for 2 months. They thought it was fabulous. The kids swam in the pool, got a contractor in there, and that was not in good shape, I admit, but we had it restored for affordable housing, held a corner, and saved the neighborhood. This was I should have the before slide here, but a terrible vacant lot, and awful looking, and we put affordable housing there and made it look like Charleston single houses, but just had one entrance right about here. You can't see it, and it goes on to a courtyard. Now, we did that probably 20 years ago. Across the street right now, $600,000 condos are being built across from affordable housing. If it had been a sorry design, it had looked like affordable housing or something you didn't care about, it was just, we wouldn't be having that neighborhood redevelopment now. These were houses that the Medical University wanted to demolish for parking garage. We got them to give them to us and moved them to this corner lot for affordable housing. And the corner lot was a corner vacant lot because, I'm going to take my BlackBerry out of here so it doesn't go off, and corner vacant lot on a street that was stubbed because a crosstown went through about 40 some years ago. And we'd been working on the little street. I'd really not noticed it because it was, you know, not connected really well any longer. So we got them to give them to us, and we moved them to this corner lot and restored them for affordable housing. And when we were having the ribbon cutting, I went around and got up in that porch, had my camera with me, and I took this picture down the street of this tree growing out of the street. And we'd been doing a little work on that street, and the tree was not growing out of the sidewalk. It was growing out of the street. And it was like the highway guys just hadn't noticed it, you know. They would have cut it down. And it was just so alluring. And but right under it was this gosh awful looking place. So I called up people. I said, we need to buy 15.5 Cracker Street. Building official called, said, Mayor, here you want to buy 15.5 Cracker? I said, yeah. He said, Mayor, cannot be saved. And I said, well, let's go take a look at it. He said, Mayor, it's liable to fall on us and kill us. And I don't know if you can see it, but the meter box, they couldn't take it off without the house falling down. But we put some money in it and restored it as affordable housing. And when we were having the ribbon cutting on there, a lady came up to me and she said, Mayor Riley, I want to thank you. And I, what's that for, ma'am? She said, because it used to be when people asked me where I live, I was embarrassed to tell them, because everybody knew how bad Cracker Street was. She said, now I can't wait for people to ask me, because everybody knows how nice it is. We work so hard on our downtowns. You do in Lancaster, we do in Charleston. And I may say you're doing it so wonderfully well. But a normal question from a fair-minded person would be why? Why all the money, time, energy, fret about the downtown? Well, we start with the tax base, which is important, very important. and the jobs. But you know, the real answer is because it's the public realm. Downtowns, when they're healthy, enhance everyone's citizenship. From time immemorial, great towns and cities of the world have downtowns where people come, and the eye contact and the elbow contact and the commerce and all of that and that reinforcement of the democratic space enhance everyone. And you know, it's very important in America that we do not say to our culture, the good stuff is in the private realm. You got to go someplace that somebody owns rather than what you own in the heart of the city. That's why the restoring of our downtowns is so important. And ours was almost gone. When I was elected mayor in 1975, I parked behind one of those buildings the Saturday before Christmas, walked out. This was our main street, shopping center for coastal South Carolina when I was growing up. Came out of the building, turned up the sidewalk. Saturday before Christmas, there was nobody there. It was almost gone. So we did it by the numbers. If you've done here with a good strategic plan, we got to know what we're doing. And we put facade grants and showed people what buildings used to look like, and then put apartments. And you know, one by one, it takes a long time. That's okay. You didn't build cities overnight, and you're not going to rebuild them overnight. We have to be patient, one piece at a time, with the eye on the end product. And we put apartments to the second and third floor, shops on the first floor. I took some of these pictures. That's why I'm not that good. The old Swartz building looked like that. Put some money in there, got some people living above it. Hurricane Hugo knocked it down. Things were starting to come back a little bit. We got them to put an even better one in there. A big challenge was this. This was our main street, King Street. When I was a child, there were 2 department stores there. Vacant lot. King Street almost gone. Now we had Market Street here in the 70s. It was beginning to have a little activity. So our downtown strategic plan said we needed a lot of critical mass there. Because what we wanted to do was to connect Market Street to King Street. Human beings do not walk past ugly places or big vacant lots in an urban setting. It's unnatural, and they're not going to do it. So we needed to do that, and you know, the challenge in the American city, which you're doing so well here, is that to avoid, you know, just get something. I mean, Mayor, if you look at that thing, put something. I don't care. Go find somebody and get them to put something in there, you know, like some other city did or something else. And we need something. That'd be kind of like being sick and going to the doctor and say, "Doctor, I haven't been feeling well lately. Can you give me an operation?" And you know, any kind of operation will be fine. Just so we don't do that with cities. It's got to be just right. It's an ecosystem. We have to be very careful about the unintended consequences of well-meaning actions, and also we have to have the energy and courage to work very hard to put the right pieces into place that will give the restorative health to our city. So we had, as you're doing here, a hotel conference center. Hotels, conference center generate people. That's what downtowns in America need, people on the street. Used to be a lot of people, because that's all there was. Were no malls, plus you had lots more people living and occupying the downtown space. So we had to respect the scale of the buildings. We couldn't build anything tall on the street. We had to set it back. We had to respect the market building. And that's what King Street looked like back then. And we built it. And it did everything we hoped. It has proven to be the extraordinary catalytic agent. We insisted on good urban design and retail. And now the details are very important in city building. But that's not unusual. We know in our own lives experience the details, the last little bit, you know, is what makes it really great. So just a couple of interesting details. See, one, the park we get to in a minute. This is a conference building, and they wanted the pre-assembly space overlooking the church. And we said no, because and the reason they wanted that is you come down the hotel elevator, if you're in the hotel, get on the second floor, peel into pre-assembly, and you're right there. But that meant on the street, we would not have windows, and there would be the kitchen or service area or phony windows. And we told the developer no, and they said, well, this is more cost effective. And we said, yeah, but the whole reason we're doing this is to energize the street. And you know, it used to be in the American city, if you built on a street, you wanted the street. And then, you know, in the 20th century, where there was a lot of the construction, it was on an arterial highway out of the city, and you put a surface parking lot, and then you built something behind it. And we lost that basic understanding. So anyway, we got to put the pre-assembly street space on the street, and it's a wonderful window, and you see the street. The street sees the space, it's real, it's connected. You know, maybe 75 buildings have been restored and energized because of the catalytic agent, the right catalytic agent. One Sunday after church, I was walking up the street to buy a New York Times on King Street after the Charleston place, this main redevelopment was done, and I saw a fellow approaching me who I knew, but he was out of place. He was retired, married, lived in the suburbs. He was by himself noon Sunday walking down the street. I was a little worried, so I approached him and I said, how you doing? And he said, fine. I said, what are you doing down here today? And he said, Joe, and he started blushing like, you know, I caught him, and he was going to have to reveal an emotion, which we men don't like to do generally. And he said, Joe, Doris and I went to early church, and she had some chores to do around the house. And he said, Joe, I just like to be honest with you, I just like to come down here to Paul McCall and walk around because it looks so nice, and I'm so proud of it. And that's why all the work that we put into the difficult job of bringing increased health and vitality to downtown is so important, because it gives pride to our citizens. Then we got an office building. They obviously built it, but before the office building, there was a abandoned gas station that was ugly, and then it had a billboard there. And the billboard was really infuriating. The billboard said, if you like Charleston, you will love Savannah. And it made me mad as hell. And so we got to people wanted to put an office building there, and they needed to buy a little land from the city to make it work. We owned some land behind it. I said, fine, we'll sell to the real estate committee, but I want some shops, I want storefronts on Market Street. And they said, no, Mayor, we're not doing mixed use. If people don't want mixed use, I'd say, we will save the land. They said, we go broke. I said, that's too bad. But what did William H. Holloway say when he started studying in New York how people use cities? He said, people won't walk down the street with abandoned things or with blank walls, and I don't want draperies. So they agreed and gave us some storefronts. Later said it's the best idea they had because they were getting more money from the shops than they would have from the draperies. And so we got some storefronts. And these people were having a perfectly good time till I took their picture. They wondered why I was taking their picture. But they were looking in Mueller's jewelry as they were walking down the street, moving. And then we get Saks Fifth Avenue to put a store on the other corner. So that was, you know, amazing for us. And Saks hadn't put a store in downtown America in 30 years. And we got a great urban design. I apologize for my photography, but we had great storefronts along the street, Main Street, and on the side street. Now, across the side street from it was this old theater that had been closed. So we did a deal and bought it and sold it to a developer to fix up. And they restored it. Really great Art Deco theater for a multi-purpose hall. But on the side street, across from Saks, was the wall that was very unattractive. And but they were willing to put some shops in there. And I said, now, can we get some good storefronts? And they said, well, Joe, the sidewalk is too narrow, so we just have to kind of punch some holes in the wall like that. Well, that usually doesn't work. So I said, what would it take to get real storefronts? And he said, well, you'd have to widen the sidewalk. I said, no problem. So I sent a note to our people and said, let's widen the sidewalk on Market Street. I got a very courteous note back and said, Mayor, you can. So I called them and I said, why can't we? And they said, well, if you widen the sidewalk, you'll have to narrow the street. And I said, well, you know, I was good in math. I figured that out early 1200. And I said, what's wrong with narrowing the street? I said, what we got now? I said, you got 11-foot lanes. I said, what about 2 9-foot lanes? Pick up 2 feet on either side. They said, well, it'd be too narrow. I said, well, how do you know? And they said, well, we're sure. So they came with this wonderful presentation a couple weeks later, and it showed that if a beer truck, well, I love beer, but if a beer truck was illegally parked in one moving lane of traffic distributing beer, that a Greyhound bus, which no longer comes into that part of downtown because of depot, but if they got lost and if the bus came downtown and tried to pass the illegally parked beer truck, the rearview mirrors would hit. And I said, well, what if we don't let the beer truck illegally park? And so we didn't, and now we got nice storefronts, and I should take a better picture, but you got the light standards and the trees. But you know, so often in the American city, because we're so worried, we'd say, Lord, whatever we do, make sure we take care of the beer truck. When the real question is, how does a mother feel holding the child's hand walking down the street? How does a citizen feel? Is it a place that nourishes and inspires them? That's a real question. We had a terrible fire upper Main Street. Our firefighters, it was a part of Main Street that was even struggling more, and our firefighters did a miraculous, courageous job. I thought the whole block was gone. I was out there as mayor would be, 3 in the morning. They contained it to one building. That's what it looked like the next morning. Bill Fisher called me 10 minutes after 8. He said, Mayor, we're going to issue the demolition permit on the Bluestein building. I said, no, you're not. He said, Mayor, the mortar bonding capacity is gone, and the building will fall into the street and kill people. And I said, well, not if we barricade the street. But what I knew was that it was a corner building and the part of downtown was really struggling, and if you take it down, what happens? It becomes a rubble-filled parking lot. Nothing was going on up there. So we buy the facade, long story, from the owner and agree to fix it up. Then I hear that he's just going to put a one-story building back. I call him, I said, Nicky, I hear you're putting a one-story building. He said, yeah, Joe, no one will use upper floors. I said, Nicky, if you build a one-story building, and we put several $100,000 in a 3-story facade, people will know how crazy I am. And he said, well, no one ran. I said, you build it, the city will rent it. We can always use office space. So he built it, we rented the offices. Now, of course, the private sector is in there. But not only did his business quintuple, but that one building, a building that was almost gone, the saving of it, the energy that gave probably rejuvenated 3 or 4 blocks in that part of town. Parking is a challenge in the American city. We had to build this parking garage to do our waterfront park, and I told the architects I wanted a building that didn't look like a parking garage. Now this was a long time ago, and he said, Mayor, you do not understand about architecture. An architecture form follows function, and a building is supposed to look like what it is. And I said, no, I heard that. But we're not going to do that in this particular location in Charleston. I don't want it to look like a parking garage. And so he wanted to, I told him I wanted to look like a building with closed shutters, and which we obviously eventually got. But he didn't want to do that. And he would send me these renderings of louvers that would come down a little bit, but about there, kind of as a compromise. It's like he was going to lose his credibility if you couldn't see the car. You had to see the car. And so I sent my police photographer around town taking pictures of buildings with shutters closed, and we built it. Won an award from the National Endowment for the Art. One of the state's largest law firms went in there. Now we got a bank in there and shops. But I think we helped show America that you didn't have to do that. Create the buildings that will please the eye. When the head of the National Endowment for the Art came to give us the award, and we went to dinner, lunch before the event, and I walked him past it. I thought he'd been to town and been briefed on it. And we walked past the garage, and he said, by the way, Joe, point out the parking garage to me. And I said, well, Frank, we just walked past it. This was a parking garage at our Charleston place. I mean, we had to put parking at Charleston place, and that looked seedy, beat up old stuff and strip joints and fire charred buildings, but we knew we had to save it. So we bought the buildings and cut off the back, put the parking behind it, and then gave the buildings a new life. And right now in Charleston, there are probably 100 people on that sidewalk, several restaurants. But you know, so often that zone we don't protect, and so we let it get punctured or pierced or out-of-scale buildings or whatever. But see there, it's just 2 people now, could be 100 tonight, but they're in charge. The humans control. It's a human scale. It's interesting, diverse, exciting. It's what Lancaster, it's what it's about. Then we put the parking garage behind. It's a beautiful parking garage. Put a parking garage up by a business center. We put a garden in the middle of it. You come in, you drive in, you see flowers and trees. We want them to know Charleston is a special place. Put trees in our parking lots and shrubs. And in 2 weeks, the middle of, really, about the 17th of March, less than 2 weeks, it's my flowering peppermint peach tree I got in one of our parking lots. It blooms 3 different colors. I spend $1 to go in there just to see my flowering peppermint peach tree in bloom. But you know, no one ever said, you know, to have a great city, you need to have colleges, hospitals, city hall, and ugly parking lots. Nobody ever said that. And you don't want anything ugly. Charleston was built on the water. We had an opportunity to make a decision. This was burned out. You can't see too well, but a big fire in the 50s, and it was just sitting there, miscellaneous parking, and the developer came up with the idea of a Venice of the Southeast, nice, high-rise, gated tax base. And we said no, it should be a public park. And he said no, it should be the Venice of the Southeast. So we had a debate. We threatened to condemn it, which he didn't appreciate. And he said I was a Hitler-like dictator. But what I knew was that great cities of the world that are on water like that give the water to the citizens. You don't be afraid. It was back in the 70s when we were worried about American city and worried about people and had to gate and back away and fence and hide and private realm everything. And we said no. So we acquired it. Later, we worked out a good deal. And 2 years later, when we had the deed signing, everybody had a couple of drinks, and he got up and told the people that I had reminded him of Winston Churchill, which was so much nicer than what he said before. But anyway, and it was, of course, controversial. We all know that. Money, property off the tax books, parks, complicated. We studied what the city used to be. You never want to plop something down. Make sure it fits and works. And we came up with a model and raised private money, put city money in it, of course, and that's what it looked like before we started construction, and then that's what it looked like afterwards. And no one can imagine Charleston without the waterfront park. Not a single person. It's a joy, kids playing in the fountains in the summertime. And you know, when you design a park, designing the purpose of the park is the first and arguably the most important thing. What is its role in the city? Because every park is different. And we decided, thank goodness, with good input from our citizens, that this should be a quiet park. We got plenty of active parks and places for music and all of that. So we don't have no permits there. It's a place where in a bustling city you come for peace and repose. And it's now 15 years constructed, won an award from the American Society of Landscape Architects and the National Trust, something over 15 years old, that it kind of earned a special sense of a special place. It works. The only time my wife and I ever get to swing in the benches is when it's raining in February, because it's so popular and we are very happy with that. And then the private development always comes. So we build a park, and then the private development, we had the land, we put it up for proposal, and I got them to put an art gallery in there for us. Most expensive new residential housing, residential construction in South Carolina, built right on the public park. In fact, it's really nice. One day I was jogging and sitting in the park, looked like probably a homeless person. We don't, we make sure parks aren't slept in overnight, but it was in the morning, 6:30, and he was sitting in the park drinking a cup of coffee. 15 feet away, and I should have a better picture, their balconies right on that level. 15 feet away in a balcony at the first level, kind of sharing the same space, if you will, was a resident of a $1 million residence on his balcony having a cup of coffee. And it was just, two people, opposite ends of the economic spectrum, reasonably near each other, sharing with the same sense of citizenship, public space. And we get the ethic going, okay, public on the water's edge, so the port's going to redevelop this area. They've run out of elbow room. We got water, going to have waterfront access along there. And then this tall building was built a long time ago, and we're building an aquarium. We're building an aquarium on one side and a maritime center there. But I needed to get in front of that, because eventually I want you to walk all the way along. And I didn't want you to be at the aquarium, I'll show you a picture of it in a minute, and not be able to walk across the front to the maritime center. But I knew I couldn't condemn it. Politically, I couldn't do it. So I waited and worked with them until their bulkhead started caving in. And then we worked out a deal, and we acquired their bulkhead and put $1 million in restoring it and accepted permanent maintenance responsibility. So we then get the connection in front. And we close at 9:30 at night. Everybody won. They get the front door, but the public, I didn't want my citizens to feel like they were second class. The aquarium feeling real good about being on the water and then walk. Oh, you can't get there. So every piece we can connect the water's edge. That's a maritime center. And last night I was there with the kids from Sweden on a sailing ship having oyster roast right there overlooking the harbor, multi-million-dollar view. And we had somebody that wanted to put something else there, a big hotel. We didn't want hotels there. We wanted public access. So we got the citizens own it. And then every step along the way, our aquarium, each time we get it. On the other side of town, we had a highway, a road with no shoulder. And we created this little walkway there, and it took a lot of time. We had to get permits because we were filling in some marsh, and we put the palmettos. There was nothing there before. And when we finished it, people would stop and say, "Joe, that's so great. I didn't know you were going to do it. We come down from the suburbs to walk." It's like because their citizenship became more valuable. They didn't have to join anything. They didn't have to buy anything. They just had to be a citizen in the city and enjoy another beautiful part. And then we built our ballpark. And your ballpark is fabulous. Oh, congratulations. What a wonderful thing. And I don't have to tell you how wonderful it is. You know how wonderful it is. We built our ballpark on the water where you eventually come under the bridge and you can sit in the ballpark and see the river and see the clouds and see the sky. Then you buy a hot dog behind first base, a hot dog and a cold beer. Turn around after you buy it, and that's what you see. It's like an observation deck at a national park. But it's all part of the public realm. When you built your ballpark, you gave your citizens, they have to come see the game, but it's their facility. You gave them something that enriches their lives and builds wonderful memories. We'll eventually connect around the river. Visioning is so important. We were building a new bridge to connect the peninsula with suburban islands that were never connected before. Coming into this one street, Calhoun Street, that and on the other end was going to be the aquariums. The preservation organization called me one day and said, "Joe, you got the new bridge coming in. Do y'all have a plan for Calhoun Street? You have a lot of development pressure." And I said, "No, we don't." I felt so bad, because we should. So we quickly got the neighborhoods and institutions together and organizations, preservation, others, hired a great planner, and they came up with a vision for Calhoun Street, which we should have done. And it's a hard part of city building, the visioning, really hard to see. You got to work hard to see, but you can. And it said that it could be a great urban boulevard. They came up with some design guidelines on how to place buildings. So luckily we had the vision when good friends of mine bought this typical lot on Calhoun Street to put a max sleeper in a motel. Well, our plan said we didn't want motels along there. So I told the guys they couldn't build a motel. They said, Joe, look, we got a cash cow. This could be wonderful. I said, no. They got mad. We fought it out. City Council, I won by 1 vote. Stop the cheap motel. County was looking for site for a new library. We bought it and gave it to the county. Because of the plan and the vision, rather than a cheap motel, we get a new library. Across the street was a big surface parking lot. School board was going to move out of downtown. We did a deal with them. Built the school board offices, city planning offices on the top floor. Instead of a surface parking lot, you got school board and city across the street from a library rather than a cheap motel across from a surface parking lot, because the citizens demanded that they have a right to develop a vision for their city. This was a hotel that was bankrupt on the corner of Calhoun Street and King Street, our main retail street. Obviously a very important corner, and the Prudential required it in foreclosure, and the college wanted it for a dorm. I called the college president and I said, Mr. President, a great guy, I said, you can't have it for a dorm. I didn't own it, but I told him that the city said he couldn't have it for a dorm, and he said, well, Joe, why don't you like dorms? I said, no, I like dorms, but if this becomes a dorm, everybody knows that that was once a hotel, right? So it's like a little invisible lights blinking. Used to be a hotel. The area went down. Couldn't make a hotel work anymore. Best thing they could do is a dorm. And we worked hard on dorms. We got great dorms around. They energized the city. But at this #1 anchor location, so banks weren't lending money on hotels back then. I called the head then of the Nations Bank, Hugh McCall, who I knew, and I said, Hugh, can y'all put together anyway? He said, yeah, Joe, I'll help you. I remember that hotel when I was a young banker. So we got 7 banks. We put HUD money in it, preservation tax credits. We bought land next door, put a parking garage. People said, you're going to lose your shirt, Joe. City shouldn't be putting all that money in this private development. It got restored. They paid us off so fast that I had to pay a prepayment penalty to HUD. We got the money back so quick. But because the right use went there, this became that. This, it really looked like that, became that. Skip over this. A whole block was restored because of the right use. And then across the street we had the square that had never really just been felt to be a special place. It plopped down a bandstand on it in the late 40s, had surface parking on it. We hired Laurie Olin from Philadelphia and then Michael Van Valkenburg from Harvard, and we came up with a vision to make it a great urban space. That's what it looked like. And put a lot of money in it. It cost money. Create a wonderful urban garden, got rid of the parking, created this pedestrian street. People absolutely adore it. We put fountains. Redevelopment around it, amazing. The tax base growing. They just sold a piece of property. I couldn't believe what they sold it for. You invest in the public realm in cities, and then the private investment always follows. It has in every great city in the world. And great cities are not million people cities. Great cities can be little towns. And size doesn't matter. It's the feeling of self-worth and the quality of the sense of place. Well, almost finished the promise. Charleston is a small peninsula. We had a tourism business that kept growing, and it started creating friction between the residents and the visitor industry. We didn't want that. We need the tourism industry, but we just needed to manage it. It wasn't guided, so I created the nation's first tourism management plan to basically decide how we wanted visitors to use the city and where we wanted things to be. When we started tourism management, we had 1.7 million visitors. We have 4 million visitors now, with less friction, less irritants, just by accepting the responsibility of managing it. But we needed a visitor center. They'd come to see the flowers in the spring, and then it came all year round. So we got this old railroad depot in the right part of town where we would intercept the visitors and restore the historic railroad buildings. This building, beat up, became our visitor center. People pose in front of the visitor center even before they go in to have their picture taken because they think it's so nice. And then we have a wonderful bus shed. Your buses come in. We got Confederate jasmine and wisteria growing up the columns, so it smells good when you come in there too. And then you see this model of the city in the floor when you go in the visitor center, because I wanted people to be confident that they could walk the city, because that's what we wanted people to do, to get out of their cars and then experience the city on foot using the trolleys. So they see that, they leave the car in the park garage, and then they get on the trolley. And we've saved a lot of marriages by doing that too, you know, rather than discussing because you're going down the wrong way, honey, and all like that. They park the car and then get in the trolley, and then they go where we want them to go. And they go down our main street. Oh, isn't that a nice shop? Well, let's stop and get off, and there you sit. In conclusion, you wonderful people have come here tonight, and obviously you love Lancaster and care about it. But what about the average citizen? How important are these things to them? What is the political support out there? Well, this is a borough's wholesale liquor dealer where I go very infrequently to buy alcoholic beverages. But I go there because I know the guy who owns it and grew up with him. And it's also a neat place, kind of interesting because they all wear pistols. And it's, you know, it's warm in Charleston. So, I mean, they don't have on jackets. They got a pistol and a holster. And, you know, you feel quite safe. And Charleston is a safe city. They got a permit from the state somehow. Anyway, they all got pistols on. And so I went in there one day with my very modest purchase. And I approached the counter. And these guys that I know start converging on the other side of the counter like they wanted to give me some information. You know, you start getting nervous, right? And what do these guys want to talk to me about? Well, we had this street that looked like that, and we're putting a water line down the middle. A friend of mine sent me a note and said, Joe, while you're digging up, why don't you plant something? So I sent the idea of parks guy. He came up with that plan. So rather than this, we got that. One of those guys leaning on his pistol in the liquor store said, Joe, you know what y'all did down there at Broad and Raleigh? I said, yeah. He said, that's the prettiest thing I ever saw. Another guy leaning on his pistol said, Joe, you got a big oak tree y'all transplanted. I said, yeah, we thought that'd be nice. Then they want to talk about flower beds. Another guy said, you know, I go 2 miles out of the way to go see that on the way home. These guys selling liquor, wearing pistols, what do they want to talk to the mayor about? Beauty. That's what our culture will support it, but we all know we need it. It's a basic human nourishment to give happiness and inspiration in our lives. So the political support is there. Is there a public policy imperative? Yes. And that is described by this. We were putting bluestone sidewalks in our waterfront park, and we don't mortar the joints in the sidewalks. You just bluestone, you lay them in sand beds, and we hadn't done slate sidewalks in 100 years. So we bought this very expensive slate, and they put it down, and it just didn't look right. I was so disappointed, and I realized it was because they saw it too precisely. So it looked like some kind of phony thing, whatever, I don't know. So I asked our parks guy, and he looked at it. So they came up with this idea of taking the torch around each edge, and it just rounds it. doesn't discolor it, and then it looks just right. So what you have is a city worker essentially on his hands and knees, attending to a tiny detail in the city. And that's how we Americans have to feel about our cities. They are the future of our country, and we must treat them with the care that we would with the precious family heirloom that we had inherited, that we want to preserve and pass on to our great-grandchildren. And last, is there a moral imperative? The moral imperative is that a city should be the place where every citizen's heart can sing. This was the waterfront park, the first phase of it, and we rebuilt this pier. And the architects, I thought we needed a rail around the pier, and they said, no, Joe, that'll be fine. It's probably what it used to be. It kind of fallen into the harbor, where they found the stones. And they said, you know, Joe, people might even sit on the granite. It'll be okay. I said, all right. So one morning I was jogging there, sun up, and I saw a fellow sitting right there, just like you said. I didn't disturb him. I knew him. He was suffered from epilepsy. His jobs were sweeping up in front of a gas station, shining shoes. Rode a bicycle, lived with his mother. I saw him a couple of weeks later. I said, Clarence, I saw you at the park the other morning. He said, yeah. I said, you go there often? He said, I go every morning. And I said, why is that? He said, Joe, because it's so beautiful, and I really love it going down there and see the sun come up, and every now and then one of those big ships come in. What I realized was that, you know, Clarence Hopkins had never been out of Charleston. He'd never seen the beautiful rolling farmland of Pennsylvania, or the rocky coast of Maine, or purple mountain majesties, or amber waves of grain. All he had and all he knew was his city. And we have lots of citizens like that, that their life's experience and opportunity for inspiration and optimism and hope that comes from being surrounded by beauty and order, their only chance to achieve that is in their city. When we opened the waterfront park, which was 2 years after this experience, when it was completely done, I hadn't seen him in a long time, found out he'd had a stroke. But he was recovering, but he had lost permanently his motor ability and his speech. I arranged for him to come to the opening of the park. We sent the handicap van. The family thought it was odd that I would find Clarence to get him to come. We had several thousand people there, symphony playing, sunset, May the 10th. Prettiest night you ever saw. And I wanted him there because I knew he would enjoy it. But I wanted him there for me and for all of my colleagues, like many of you, that had worked so hard for a long time to build a park. Because in seeing Clarence there, we would be reminded why we did it, and why we had to do it, and why we have to do what you're doing tonight. For when Clarence Hopkins was healthy in his city, he could get on a bicycle in the morning and ride down to a public place and clothe himself with peace and beauty as he began every day. We work hard to build great places and great towns and cities for Clarence Hopkins among us. Then we'll build great cities for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
In your program there, or attached to your program, you should find some cards. And if you have any questions, if you write those down and then pass them to the outside of the rows, we have people that will collect them, and we will present those to the mayor. In your discussion tonight, we'll start with a question that was handed to me. It has to do with Charleston Place, which is, as you described, a very beautiful facility. I've had the opportunity to be there. But would you tell us how that facility, that hotel facility, affected the revitalization of that part of Charleston?
In the most positive ways possible. It really has transformed our downtown, and it's because it brought people. And I'm not a urban designer or a consultant, and my trip back to Lancaster has been quick. But what I saw today, what you've done, as I was talking with the mayor and some others, is you seldom get the opportunity to put that kind of use in the very best location. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, was that it spins people out. It spins people out onto the street and onto the sidewalks. And that's how you commercial buildings, we might buy a residential structure that is old and because we love it and we'd like to live in it. But a commercial building, it has to have commercial viability based on its location. So that's what it's done, and it is absolutely remarkable.
Another question that we have for you, Mayor, is that one of the interesting things is how you have really brought the planning of the city to the people. In fact, if you walk down, I think it's probably Market Street, and about 2 doors down from the Parrot Head shop is the Mayor's Institute on City Planning. How have you engaged the public in the planning process at Charleston?
Well, in a host of ways, and it's and we have to do it because we always do better when the citizens are engaged. So we, of course, we created a civic design center, which is to allow more public engagement in civic design. And we, with all of our planning initiatives, as I know you do here in Lancaster, we engage the public, at the beginning. And I don't want to create the impression that we have unanimity on issues in Charleston. We've got a lawsuit right now on a hotel that the city thinks is appropriate. Our Board of Architectural Review thinks it's appropriate. City Council thinks it's appropriate. Many preservation leaders think it's appropriate, but some don't. And so it's, we're not always going to agree, and then we have, I have citizen participation at City Council and Mayor's Night In, and we have, our hearings are very robust, and our planners all know that, that they're challenged with, and they accept it, with being engaged with the public. And, but I will tell you that there is I can't think of a project that we have done in Charleston that hasn't been made better because of citizen engagement and public participation. It always does, and it always will.
When the streets in Charleston, have you had the experience of turning any one-way streets back into two-way streets?
We have very favorably. Our main street, King Street, the upper part of King Street, where the fire was, I showed you, was a one-way, and we reversed it. It's made all the difference in the world. And we've done not to bore you with details, but going through residential neighborhoods, we just did a couple of years ago a pair, and it's made all the difference. I enjoy driving down it more. The pace is better. We're getting ready to do two more one-way sections, Ashley Rutledge and Spring and Cannon. It doesn't always work. You can do traffic studies in advance and all of that, but it's a human scale thing, and it makes the street more interesting. It makes it more livable. It slows cars down. It's just a natural traffic calming. You drive less fast when you're, meeting cars coming the other way in reasonably narrow streets, and if you were both going the same way. We're also going to probably study a street that we won't be able to do it on. And so, all streets are different, but we've had very favorable success with that.
Mayor, in Pennsylvania, we have a system of municipal government where the entire county is divided into municipalities. As a consequence, the city of Lancaster is immediately surrounded by a series of suburban townships, which are separate municipalities. It's somewhat similar in a sense to Charleston being surrounded by water and separated from the suburban communities on the other side of the river, on the other side of the bay. How have you involved people from outside of the city, from the suburban communities, in the life of Charleston?
Well, two things. First of all, we do have the ability to annex, and we've worked very hard. So we have portions of James Island, Johns Island, west of the Ashley, and Daniel Island, not that that means anything to you, in the city, and we've worked very hard to do that. And it's good that we were able to. But I always, a center city, I always feel that my city, which is a center city, is the city for the residents of the metropolitan area. Even though many residents would say, I'm not a resident of the city of Charleston, or I might not want to be a resident of the city of Charleston. But they use it, and usually they love it. And center cities should be prideful of that role. I've been down at our waterfront park and had people come up to me and say, Mayor Riley, I'm from Somerville, which is 22 miles away, or Hanahan, which is 14 miles away. And they say, I love your park. And I say, thank you so much, but this is your park. It belongs to you. And so whatever we do in festivals or parks, in museums and all those things, we just unveiled our arts festival calendar for this Piccolo's Plato this May and June, and it's for the region. And so and if you can't grow, one thing we have to do, we've worked hard and not successfully enough, but we keep pushing for state and national policy to recognize and invest in our cities, because the fact of the matter is there is no national economy. It's an economy of a collection of economic centers, and cities have always been and are going to be the economic centers. So if state law doesn't let us grow, and we're really somewhat restricted as well, we need to push for state and national policies to reinvest the tax base that they benefit from in the renourishment of our cities.
One of the accomplishments that you showed us in your slides was Saks Fifth Avenue. How did you attract Saks Fifth Avenue into Charleston?
Well, we had a UDAG grant back. We had an unused UDAG grant, and we worked a very good deal. We had to put the financial incentives in place. And I know it's controversial. These things are controversial because, why are you subsidizing, Saks Fifth Avenue? Of course, they don't own the building, but it's to achieve a public policy benefit to the community. So we worked very hard and to talk them into it. And it's a boutique store. It's not, I forget how many thousand square feet, but it's not giant. And one thing I'll tell you in all honesty that we don't have in downtown Charleston is a regular department store. We're working hard to get that. It's hard to do now. We've got consultants helping us, and the incentives they need are sometimes so off the chart. So we're working on that. That's one thing I feel that is missing is the normal place to easily go buy the towels or the sheets and all those kinds of things right in downtown. The shopping is fabulous downtown. You can buy those things too, I guess, but having a kind of a regular department store. But we're committed to doing that, and we will.
Feeling safe in an urban place is very important to its success. What is the crime rate in Charleston, and how do you deal with that? Do you use surveillance cameras as part of your public safety effort?
We're going to, and I know y'all are doing that here, and I commend you, you're ahead of us, but we're going to use surveillance cameras, and we've begun the process of doing that. We invest heavily in public safety, and we've got 121,000 people and 382 police officers, so it's about 3 per 1,000, shade more, and we work very hard in the displacement of them. We have team-based policing, they each assigned. We have 5 different team areas in the city. We pay them well and have educational incentives and requirements, and have very aggressive, which you all have here. I saw some information on your crime prevention program, but it is. I mean, people have to feel safe, and we statistically, Charleston does well comparatively, but we're in America, and we have criminal activity, and we work very hard at it. I never forget that that's the first responsibility is public safety, and what I talked about tonight is essential, but never forget that you need to make sure people are safe, and that I also know that it's the right thing to do. We got to do it, but also know that I can't. If we want to attract visitors and we want to attract residents, and if I let it get out of hand, then we don't do well with either, and the city really suffers. So we'll work hard at it.
In your talk, you discussed how the revitalization effort of Charleston has taken many years. And in that process, you have purchased a number of properties in order to revitalize them. How did you finance this? What type of financing did you find to accomplish this revitalization?
I meant back on the public safety, and we're working with the state too. I actually today on the way up here called the state senator to help with the bill we're trying to get through, because some of our state laws aren't tough enough either. The sources of revenue have been everything, and usually a feasible initiative. And by feasible, I mean it's got to be within the bounds of the right scale. But a feasible initiative won't fail for lack of money. It's, if you figure out the exact right thing. So we've used city operating money, city bond money. We've used proceeds from city land sales. We've used general obligation bonds, revenue bonds, tax increment financing bonds, private fundraising, state money, federal money, all kinds of, and I mean, and what I showed you was over a period of, 30 years, and so it's, that's a long time to do those things. Sometimes I don't feel like I've worked too fast. Sometimes I worry I haven't worked fast enough.
Mayor Riley, certain urban uses that we see in most cities, particularly things like pawn shops and check cashing facilities, tattoo shops, etc., often viewed with disfavor by a lot of citizens. How do you deal with these types of uses in a very highly built-up space like downtown Charleston?
I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know. We have the ability to regulate tattoo parlors, and we've done that, but the others we really don't have the ability to regulate. And I think if you get the economy of a street going well enough, then those places usually need to find other spots. But I hadn't figured that one out yet.
You cited examples where parking facilities have retail uses on the street level. How are you able to convince agencies like a parking authority or city agencies to go along with that type of development?
Well, we operate our own parking facilities, so we really don't need anyone else's approval. And then we also, if it's a private one, we have design review. And there's some places where it doesn't work. You don't want to force something. So if we've got a parking garage that's on a side street where retail wouldn't work. I mean, it wasn't any other retail going there. But what we did there was just with good urban design, with the openings and with plantings and with the scale and the rhythm of everything, we made it, made it work. It made it very pleasant.
Can you tell us just a little bit more, Mayor, about the visitor center and how it operates, who runs it, and how it functions within the city?
The city runs it. We own it. We operate it, and we don't charge admission. Our Convention and Visitors Bureau staffs it for information about where to go and what to do, and we earn income from a gift shop, and our people do very well with that, so that helps with the overhead and expenses. Also, we have a movie about Charleston, and we earn income from that. We update the movie every so many years, so it's not inexpensive to produce it. And then we rent it, and then we earned income. We rent it out in the evenings. It's very popular. Last night, I don't know what was going on. They had something nearby, but there was obviously a lot of people in there. So it does a good job of covering its expenses, operating expenses from earned revenue, but it's very helpful. And I didn't get to go in your visitor center today. It's a beautiful, gorgeous building that you have, and an obvious, fabulous location. I don't need to tell you that, but it's people, visitors like info, and I mean, we've all traveled. I look for the visitors' information place as soon as I get someplace, and get me a good map, and try not to get myself and my wife lost too many times. But it's very important, and I think it's great that you all have one. And not many cities don't have visitor centers often enough. They don't. They undersell themselves, and of course this Lancaster is unusual in its beauty and in its history, but there are a lot of cities that people come to visit and they have a hard time finding out what's going on. And visitor center is very important. That it helps them. They spend more money, but they also have a better time, and they'll come back again, and then they'll tell their neighbors when they go back to wherever that it was a great place to visit because it was easy to get around and had a lot of information.
You showed in the slides where the tour buses come into the visitor center and don't necessarily go right into the downtown, but rather you encourage visitors to take the transit, the trolleys around the city. Combined with that, you have historic carriage rides and I think historic walking tours. How important are those types of facilities to the visitor experience in understanding Charleston?
They're very important, and we regulate all of that. We regulate from even walking tours. You can have no more than 20 people, and carriages, certain number, each zone can have 12 operating one time and all like that, which is more detail than you need to know. But we manage all of it carefully, but it's a very robust activity. And then the buses, we do allow buses in the downtown, but there are some routes where a larger bus can go, which is really limited, and then there's some routes where a medium-sized bus can go, and then there are many places that the buses can't go. But having the variety of experiences is very beneficial. Some want one or the other, and but it's but we make sure we're for our citizens that we're on top of it. It's because we want all of you to come visit Charleston, and more people to come visit Charleston. But we try to stay on top of the wonderful, fabulous American creative and entrepreneurial spirit that will figure out something that we hadn't thought of before, like renting mopeds. Now that would be a fun way to go around the city, but that also would be very dangerous. You know, you turn loose a lot of people on mopeds and they all of a sudden think they're in a theme park and not a city, and they're wheeling around a narrow alley and somebody's trying to walk out of their car with groceries and get killed. So we had to be alert to prevent the renting of mopeds and other kind of things like that.
In guiding the revitalization of Charleston, did you have to change any major public policies, or did the city already basically have an idea of how it wanted to develop and where it wanted to go?
Well, I followed great municipal leadership and benefited greatly, and my city benefited greatly from that. The city, however, did not have a planning department heritage. In fact, when I was elected, it was new and it was one person there. So we worked hard to substantially enhance that. And we created, I created a design review committee, and we've got the commercial corridor design committee and the civic design center, and the city didn't have a staff architect before, so we brought in resources to give us the greater capacity to wisely plan for the future. And both in the downtown, but also in the suburban parts of our city, which have a very challenging land use and planning and highway decisions.
This will be our last question of the evening, and basically is, how do you plan for the continuation of success? How will Charleston continue to be successful?
Well, the citizens will do that. As I was talking with the reporter that asked me if long tenure is a necessary part of a continuum of community improvement, and it clearly is not, because we